cannot afford to miss a single moment of the next hour. Get ready to have your ideas about sexuality, love, and relationships blown wide open. It's time to get educated, entertained, and enlightened, as well as sexually empowered. You have now tuned into the Tantra Love, Sex, and Intimacy Show. Now, here's your host, Tanya Diamond.
Okay, so wait, that's me.
That's your turn to speak.
So that's so weird. I've been doing so many interviews lately and when I do interviews, and I'm the interviewee, the one being interviewed, I'm on my home phone, which is where I am today, not in the studio. And so I'm sitting here, la-di-da-di-da, okay, they're going to introduce, the hosts are going to yak for a while, and then I realize, wait, this is my show.
Right, your turn to speak first.
I am the host. I'm so glad you're in the studio, Josh, because otherwise, who knows what would happen.
I think Sam's reliable.
Well, Sam would cue me. He'd say, Tanya, your show, start talking, do something.
I'm somewhat
Say
reliable.
something. All right, well, it's Thursday. I'm on a phone. Josh is in the studio. Sam's hanging out with him, and we have a guest on the line, and our guest's name is John, and I'm going to bring him on, let him introduce himself, and talk about what he is up to. I've got his website open. I'm going to go ahead and hop on Facebook while he's introducing himself and put a link to his website there and who he is, and that way any of you listening or follow me on Facebook or Twitter can go hop on and see what's going on, because I think he's going to need something from you. I think he's going to need something from 100,000 people, and we're really going to wonder what that is. So, hi, John.
Hi. How are you?
We're fabulous. Okay, so tell us who you are, how to find you, and what you're all about.
Okay. Well, my official title, I guess, is Dr. John Biter.
Doctor. Okay.
I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm a certified sex therapist. I work in Pittsburgh, and I developed the tool that you were talking about, the survey, that I developed actually to help individuals and couples to understand the psychology of their sexuality. Mm-hmm. And it's a free anonymous survey that basically gives out some really cool information at the end. It takes you about 10 minutes to take, and it's going to tell you what your sexual preferences are.
What my sexual preferences are?
Correct.
You get to have more than one.
Like whether I want bananas or...
Now, I'm actually looking at 4 very broad categories.
Okay.
One of them is, the first one is what I call partner orientation, and whether you prefer to be the dominant or submissive partner.
Whether I want to be on the top or the bottom?
Well, dominant is the person who likes to initiate sexual activity. The submissive likes to be initiated into it.
Wow, I'm going to definitely have to take this test. What's the next category?
The next domain is arousal. How do you prefer to be aroused, through touch or imagination? Mm-hmm. And then the third domain is how do you experience pleasure? Is it more emotional or more physical? And then the last preferences deals with your sexual routine. Do you prefer something habitual, well-known versus something adventuresome?
Well, this is going to be fascinating because, I would say that I could, based on what I know, categorize most people into somewhere in there versus by their gender. Are you finding that to be true, or you don't know yet because the survey's not done?
No, it's based on, I've had 5,000 people take it right now, and so what I found, which supports a lot of other research that I've done, is that males typically group around one specific set of preferences, where women are more diverse in their presentations of their sexuality. And that just goes, to me, that just supports our culture's notion of what men, grow up to think they're supposed to be in a sexual relationship.
Right. So thereby men prefer to be the initiators and prefer to get their pleasure physically.
Correct.
And then tend to, be aroused more by by touch than by imagination.
Correct.
And then let's see, what was the other category that I missed there?
The sexual routine.
Sexual routine. That's interesting. Men are very sexual routine oriented.
Okay, so habitual, well-known, or adventuresome?
Habitual, well-known, or as far as they want to be adventuresome, but because they're so interested in making sure their partner has a good time, if they find one thing that works, they'll stick to it forever.
You're right on, except for they have the survey they've been testing out as adventuresome. So
are they? Well, I know that they like to be the adventuresome. In other words, yeah, men want to try new things and do that. But when it comes to how to make sure that their sexual satisfaction or how to give their woman an orgasm, if they found the pleasure map, the route once, they generally stick to that route.
Right.
Yeah. So, that's one of the things that women complain about, of course, is that one of those things where it's like, well, we did it that way, and he was successful, and his idea of success was my orgasm, and now forever after, that's how he wants to do that.
And the agenda is to get there.
Right.
Yep.
So that's definitely kind of an interesting thing there. So I'm glad to know that I'm not too far off the mark of what's really absolutely happening.
Right.
That would have been sad. You have completely missed the boat. All right, so what are you going to do with all this information? I mean, what's going on?
Well, one of the things, because I'm trying to get information from around the world, I want to know, does our culture have a different set of preferences, say, than other cultures? I have, obviously broken out on, male-female lines. And when you go through the survey, you'll see some questions that, typically are coming out very strong for, either of those two genders. So, just basically learning, and what I've discovered in administering the survey to other people and the feedback that I've gotten, a lot of people said, this was great, that I actually knew my own set of preferences, but I really didn't know my partner's. So people have been in relationships for, 5, 10, 20 years, didn't even know their partner's preferences.
We know how common that is based on when I teach couples workshops, and I actually have them do some very, very simple techniques like tell your partner what you really like.
And actually communicate?
I know, and all of a sudden, 15 years, it's like, I didn't know you liked that. So that is, I'm glad that's holding up, too, that basically it's one of those things where so they're taking them together, each person's taking them and then comparing them?
Or they take it separate, print off their results, and then share it. And I tell people, before you share your results, see if you can guess what the other person's was. How well do you know them? And
right.
Some couples have decided to, do either a print screen or watch the other person take the test, and before they answer each question, they'll say, here's how I think you would answer it.
Right.
And then they say, you're way off base. Where did you get that? Again, it's a way for them to start a dialogue around this.
Yeah. So that's good. So we can use this either as for our own personal preference. We can use it for several things, our own stuff, and a way to know our partner better.
Exactly.
And then so once you gather all this information, you find out all the ins and outs and who's and ha's. What, is this going for a book eventually? Or?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I want to do is write book about it. I'm actually doing some blogging right now, just some of the preliminary results. So.
Okay.
What I find interesting is that right now, more men have taken my survey than women.
Right.
So I think that's pretty interesting.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I mean, I don't believe that I've swayed, how I've, put the test out there for people to see, but I think men are more willing to go and explore than women have been. Some of the comments I've received from women is, well, I don't want everything I have out on the Internet. And I'm assuring people I'm not capturing IP addresses. It's completely anonymous,
Mm-hmm.
actually for your use only. I'm just collecting it as, a major, data sample, but whatever.
Well, it's interesting because looking at your site is definitely more feminine balanced. In other words, when I opened your site, it looks feminine friendly. And so it's not, it's not like, oh, this is like a man's site. So actually very much geared it towards a woman's comfort as far as a website looks like. And, the thing is, though, I don't know if you're getting more married men than single men, but I typically, it's single men that want to have a lot of answers to the questions about sex. And then married women are generally the more unhappy sexually. And so they're the ones that come to my class, married women and single men. It's kind of interesting.
Wow.
The people that are talking to me. And women are saying that basically they're not satisfied, and they're not talking orgasm. They're talking that just their emotional needs, their intimacy needs. And then single men, of course, are concerned about performance and how to, find a woman, and then once you find her, how do you keep her? Their big question is, how long do I have to last, and how do I get her to an orgasm every time?
Yeah, and just as you described that's what I guess that's my platform in my therapy that I really go against, is that performance-based sexuality, and I promote more of a pleasure-based sexuality, because that's what gets men and women actually into a lot of trouble.
Right.
In the bedroom.
Well, hang on, and we're going to have, remember I told you we were having live radio today? So right now we're actually having the kids running through the living room, which is always exciting on real radio. So pleasure-based versus performance-based, and what are men pretty surprised? I mean, do you primarily work with couples, or who do you work with?
It's a mixed bag. I get a lot of men who come in for erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation. I get delayed ejaculation. I get low sex desire.
We're seeing a lot more of that recently with men.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and isn't that interesting?
And like I said in the beginning, about the survey, if you only present one way of being sexual, it doesn't really allow for much variability. So
right, people are going to get bored, and
yeah.
We get a lot of, what about, passion and that type of thing, and it's like, what I tell people is if you've lost passion in your relationship, you may have lost passion in yourself.
Right.
Because if you're expecting somehow that everything in your relationship is about, the passion. My call waiting. So, John, then, having these things like premature ejaculation, which I find really interesting because I actually don't believe in it unless a man can't get his pants off. I believe that basically it's just a fact that he's hasn't learned mastery. He hasn't learned how to be in control of his body. But when I ask a man how long he's supposed to last, what do you think the answers are I get on that?
Wow. I mean, I know what the research basically says with the typical male lasts from 3 to 8 minutes, but I can't imagine, informally what guy. I mean, if they're using pornography to kind of guide them, then I'm sure it's going to be, 10, 15, 20 minutes or something. I don't know.
So, the typical man, was always asking me, how long do I need to last, And it's like, well, for what? And, their answer is to satisfy their partner. And as you know, the research shows that most women do not orgasm through intercourse alone.
Right, exactly.
And so all of these men out there who have watched too much porn are thinking that they need to be lasting for a super, super long time, and they don't really know why, though.
Yeah.
You run into that?
Yeah, absolutely. The cultural expectations that males have, that they're supposed to have this rigid penis and they're supposed to last for X amount of time. And I remind them, so I said, a couple of things. First of all, I ask people when they first come to see me, what does sex mean to you? And
that's a great question. And what does it mean mostly?
Invariably, it's intercourse.
Right. I know. That's when I ask couples, I say, what about sex? It's like, why is it? Why is it that everybody thinks sex is intercourse?
Oh, it's been culturally jammed down our throats. I mean, look at the way, I'm not trying not to get picking on any religion, but religion only said that, sex was meant for procreation, so that automatically...
Okay, right.
There you go, intercourse there. Look at the erectile dysfunction drugs. The thing that my biggest concern with that is if you ever listen to those ads, you never hear anything about relationships. No,
I know. It's always about if the Extends ad. As long as you're bigger and last longer, she's going to be happy.
You're right, yeah.
And that's crazy.
Be ready when the time is right. And then my question is, well time for what?
And what if she's done after a certain period of time and it hasn't gone away?
Right.
I wrote a thing about it. I think Viagra is kind of actually messing up more relationships than it's probably helping. There are certain points where, of course, all these things are important. But once again, if they're not addressing the intimacy and they're not addressing the other sexual needs, and if the erection is supposed to be the main event, we're really sad. We're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
So, huh?
I totally agree with that.
So you're saying, okay, guys, you're coming in, you have these issues that you think you have, be it premature, be it lasts too long, be it low desire. What do you think about the low desire? What do you think is going on with that?
Well, I wrote a blog about that, and I compared our appetite for sex to our appetite for food, and what are the choices available to satiate our appetite for food. They're innumerable. You can go on and on. But when we look at, if I use it metaphorically to look at what's on the menu for sex tonight, well, it's usually reheated leftovers that was served the night before, the night before.
Oh, man.
or heated several times down the road, right?
Yeah.
I wonder if we can heat this up and still call it food.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is, I talk about having 5 levels to sexual mastery. And I talk about level 1 being what we were just talking about, which is procreational sex, right? Okay. So everybody knows where everybody's bits go, and there's not a whole lot of thought put around any of it.
Right.
Level 2 is where I talk about, so all of a sudden, and this is where most people are, that there's a level of sophistication that they feel like there's a level of sophistication. So the man now understands that he should, indeed, give his partner pleasure or an orgasm before he has his. And, so the level 2, now that's the part where the reheating comes in of the leftovers.
Right.
Because
you made one major, well, the way you worded it is another one that I always have to get clarification on.
Okay.
And that's when you say that the man gave her an orgasm.
Right. Men don't give women orgasms. They surrender to them, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and that's what I mean. That's the whole point, is that's still level 2, where a man is thinking he gives a woman an orgasm.
Right.
And so that's his goal, and so he's in his head getting technique down. In the meantime, she's not feeling met in any emotional space.
Right.
And then level 3 is where they've been bored with the leftovers. Now they're adding people and bigger toys and more porn or more kink or more something, looking for that bigger charge. If they're still together, if they get to that point. And then we say level 4 is where they start realizing that maybe there's something more than all this. Start looking at things like Tantra, start getting educated. Because why is it that we feel like we're not supposed to have any education on relationships?
Yeah. I've always wondered that, like, why is it the thing that will affect us our entire life we get no education on, but you can buy, like, a piece of electronics and get a telephone book worth of instructions? Right,
exactly, yeah. 5 PDF downloads, a DVD, all to plug in your VCR.
Right.
And then your partner comes with 0 instructions. And then, of course, a lot of women believe that somehow the man is going to teach them about themselves. He rides on his white steed and everything's wonderful and beautiful, right?
Right.
And most women, nobody's taking accountability for their own sexuality.
Right.
And, you and I sound like we're very much on the same page with this whole thing.
Exactly.
So then you're there helping. Do you get a lot of women clients, or you said mostly men?
I'd say about 40% is what I see as women.
Yeah.
And I typically will see them for, lack of desire, inhibited sexual desire, low sexual drive. They're saying that, my libido's not matching my husband.
Right. My libido's not matching my husband. When women say that to me, I always ask them when the last time he took the trash out was. When's the last time he helped with the kids? So what is it? So, there's 40 million sexless couples in the United States. Read a survey about that once, and those are the ones that are talking. So that means sex less than once a month, right? Or less than 10 times a year.
Okay.
And what do you know about that?
Well, I mean, like you just mentioned, there's a lot of education that's never gone on, and I cringe every time, when a woman says, well, I'm looking to my partner, my husband, whatever, to kind of inform me. And I'm thinking men have to be one of the least informed about it. I mean, from an educational standpoint, they always use the excuse that we're visually oriented. So, yeah, they've been looking at things, basically naked bodies or people fornicating, but they haven't been looking at things that will actually educate them and help them understand how to connect to your partner. So.
Right. Right, and I like what you said about that. The women are looking for the men to figure it out, and you use the word men, you're using the excuse of we're visual.
Right.
What does that mean? I'm visual.
Right.
Yeah. It's like, so I don't care what anything looks like, or what?
Yeah, exactly.
That is a little bit crazy. So women coming in with the low libido, or I don't have the desire, for the 40 million sexless couples in the United States, clearly you realize we're in serious trouble too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why you're there. That's why you're writing a book and doing all of these things that you're doing. We are going to, Sam, we're going to go take a short break, and we will be back in just a moment talking to John and Josh and myself about, of course, Tantra, love, sex, and intimacy, and a fun, cool, amazing survey that you can take for free that's going to help you know more about yourself, and if you have a partner, your partner. So we will be back in just a few moments.
I'm too sexy for your party, too sexy for your party. The way I'm disco dancing, I'm a model, you know what I mean? And I do my little turn on the catwalk, yeah, on the catwalk, on the catwalk.
Are you one of the 40 million sexless couples in the U.S.? Are you wondering why having sex leaves you feeling lonely? Are you suffering from the myths of sexual dysfunction? Do you know in your heart that there has to be more than what you're currently getting out of making love? To rid yourself of sexual ignorance, get more out of your lovemaking, and find out more about spiritual sexual connection, then you need to check out www.thetantrateacher.com to receive your free copy of the ebook called Secrets of the Tantra Teacher. Don't suffer another minute without the sexual loving and ecstatic bliss you were born to receive. Get to www.thetantrateacher.com right now. That's www.thetantrateacher.com.
Is your sex life non-existent? Do sexual dysfunctions leave you soft? Is internet porn getting more than you are? Or are you paying more attention to porn than your partner? Have you tried talk therapy and it got you nowhere? You are not alone. You can be freed from sexual shame, guilt, and dissatisfaction. A visit to the Tantra Teacher is in order. Call now and mention you heard the Tantra Teacher on the radio and get a very special offer. Stop waiting for a miracle and call right now. 206-276-2735. Phone consultations or in person will get you the information you need to be successful in your love life. But you have to call now. 206-276-2735. Stop making excuses. Call the Tantra Teacher. 206-276-2735.
Did you know that you can rate this show on iTunes? The show you're listening to right now. It's true. You can leave your thoughts about the show, the topic, the guest. You can even leave a suggestion. Then, before you leave, rate the show. The hosts love hearing from you, so next time you download this show from iTunes, leave your thoughts and rate the show for the host and for others.
I'm too sexy for your party, too sexy for your...
So, that's the hard part right there. When I'm on a phone and I'm not in the studio and they've got the music going and I'm dancing, but nobody's pointed to me.
I just pointed to you.
Oh, thanks, Josh. Yeah, so Josh has been pointing to me. He's in the studio, of course, and so we have a little bit of a different format tonight. I'm doing this blind. I don't know why it feels different that I'm not actually sitting in the studio across from you, Josh, and beside Sam over there.
Mm-hmm. If it helps you to know, Tanya, the shade is down.
Oh, so you're not looking at yourself in the window?
Not at all. And it's still light outside, so it wouldn't help anyway.
That's excellent.
Well, it helps either way.
I'm happy to hear that. I'm very happy to hear that that's all working fine for you. And we're here talking with John today. And John, give us your website so people can go and right now take a look and see what's going on with the survey.
It's www.bspitest.com, and the BSPI, that stands for my last name, Biter, Sexuality Preference Indicator Test.com.
Okay, and so if somebody just hopped on and they're kind of listening to this, you want to tell them that's a free survey,
Yeah, it's anonymous. It's a 90-question forced-choice survey. It takes about 10 minutes to take, and it gives you some really cool information at the end. We actually added a little graphic to it, a chart that basically shows you how clear you are on your preference.
How clear you are?
Yes. For some people, they're kind of like, well, I'm kind of in the middle of the road, and it'll show up that way on the little graph. And then if it's a really clear preference for you, like I only get aroused through touch, it'll show, most definitely. So
okay.
There's little bands for you. So it's pretty cool.
And then how do we use that information? How do we use this information that you're giving us?
Well, like I said, you can use it to share it with your partner. Some people have used it to say, oh, my gosh, they quit thinking there's something wrong with them. It's just normal. This is just where I am. It's a preference, That's
right.
all it is. It doesn't make anybody good or bad, or this is the right set of preferences to have in order to be sexual. It just means these are your preferences. Go ahead. I was going to say, like, if you realize that you require more, say, touch in arousal, how can you share that with your partner? Okay, how is it that you're not being touched if that's your preference?
So now, isn't everybody turned on by touch?
Not everybody.
No.
I can tell you that today, absolutely today, I had a woman came in, the first time I've seen her, and she came in with that saying, I don't like to be touched.
Now, isn't that usually an indication of somebody that has been hurt or abused, and they're completely in their heads and totally disconnected from their body?
Now, yes, and having received a very negative sex message from their parent growing up.
Right.
After they got caught touching themselves.
Ah, okay.
So
we can be programmed. So normally, most humans really crave touch.
Yes.
And so if you're one of those people out there that's listening and you're like, oh, my husband hates to be touched, or I don't like to be touched, or I get really creeped out when people touch me, that's something to actually don't just assume, oh, that's just how I am. And, you can explore that. You can check out and see what that's all about, because mostly we found, and of course they've done studies with monkeys and everything else, and children, that if we don't get that bonding and that intimacy and that touch when we're little, we have more problems with it later. Or if we get hurt, or if we receive horrible messages about our bodies, or about, like you were saying, touching yourself, it can really color what happens later on in your life.
Yeah.
So what would you do with somebody like that?
Well, again, you've kind of been conditioned, at least cognitively, to think that that's bad or dirty, or I shouldn't do that. So then I think it comes down to, a bodily experience as far as trying to reverse that and kind of convincing yourself, hey, this isn't so bad after all. So you learn how to get if you have a partner, husband or whatever, or wife, and then where can they touch you that it doesn't feel threatening? Maybe you start with massage, just some general massage with the clothes on even. Maybe you like your feet massaged, or your shoulders, or your neck, or your back.
So you find some place that's safe.
Yes.
Some place that doesn't make your stomach clench or make you disconnect. Some people are so disconnected they don't even know that, though.
Right.
We teach everybody how to breathe, which sounds really kind of funny maybe, but we teach a very comprehensive breath work program so that through the breath people can start to get in touch with what they're feeling.
Right.
And because some people are so disconnected and they're so in their heads that they have no idea that there's anything to miss or that they're even experiencing. They just know they don't like it. It doesn't do anything for me.
Right.
So then go ahead.
Yeah, from a sex therapist point of view, what we get trained on is on teaching people how to do the sensate focus, 1 and 2, and so obviously that's, again, that's more body work than anything. It's not that we basically teach them the techniques but don't practice with them, obviously.
Right, so people learn to go do that on their own. And then, so what happens when, people don't have a partner? Now, I know that, where are you from? Where's your practice?
Oh, I'm in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Okay. Do you guys have the surrogacy program out there?
I'm not familiar with it.
So in California, they have a sexual surrogacy program.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, where people actually train to be sexual surrogates. So if somebody's single and they don't have a partner, and they have issues that they need to deal with a partner, they have an actual, certified, licensed, works with a therapist person that actually helps people through that kind of process. But not there in Pennsylvania, I take it.
I'm sure there are sexual surrogates here. I'm just not familiar with them. I would say this: it's not a booming business market here for that.
Right. Well, and it's one of those things where probably should be had, because I believe a lot of sex work is taking that. People are using sex work for that, something that somebody might need, which is touch or that, but out of the context of having therapy with it.
Right.
And so I think the therapy definitely helps. I don't know. We don't have a surrogacy program here in Washington State either.
Okay.
So not every state has one.
Yeah, and then you're hitting into attitudes that people have around there. That, again, without an education, people make the interpretation, oh, so what, I have to go see a prostitute and pay for this to happen. And
right, and that's absolutely not true.
Right.
It's one of those things where some of the men that I've worked with, have said that they're too afraid to go out with a woman they like. They're afraid that they won't get an erection, or they're afraid they don't know what they're doing, and so they've turned to prostitution, where they're not afraid. And
to me, that's really where I like to jump in with that pleasure-based sexuality. That really neither party in a sexual relationship needs to be afraid. What are you afraid of from a male's perspective? He's afraid that he's not going to perform to some unrealistic, cultural expectation, whatever that expectation is, and how they've defined it and brought it in.
Right.
Imagine, like when you first turn your sexual engine on as a kid, whether you saw Aunt Martha's boob or you came across a magazine or something, you weren't thinking intercourse. You were just like, oh, this feels pretty good. I'm aroused. You didn't know what that meant at that time, but you didn't have to take it any place further, and that was good enough.
Right.
So obviously we condition our males to believe, okay, well, now that you've got this feeling, you've got to do something with it. So.
Yeah, you and I are so on this. You're even using some of the exact, don't you think so, Josh, the exact same words that come out of my mouth?
Yeah.
Now that you've got this, now you feel like it's somebody else's responsibility. You got to do something with it.
Yeah.
And so what is with that? I mean, when I was growing up, I was, I was greatly inspired just by kissing. And, my boyfriend was kind of like, well, we got to do more. And it's like, why do we have to do more? Aren't we having fun here? So that push and that drive, that's culturally programmed and based, right? This is what makes you a man, or this is what you need to get. You got to go get you some.
Yeah. I mean, look at the way males even talk. And I can tell you that nothing's changed there. I've heard teenage boys still talking about the number of scores that they had, or how far did you get?
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to there's some goal to be reached, as opposed to what was wrong with just being in the moment of pleasure, of arousal, and just enjoying that feeling.
So how in the world, as a man, did you come to this experience? I mean, you becoming what you've become, but knowing what you know, because that's different, right? I mean, that's not cultural. How did you come about this?
Oh, well, this is my funny story about, how did you ever decide to become a sex therapist? Well, I had this experience in 10th grade English that basically set me up for this. I didn't know this at the time. This came as a result of self-reflection many, many years later. But I chose the topic sex education for extra credit because I wanted to earn an A in this class.
Mm-hmm.
So my sister was just home from college, and I read the book, Everything You Wanted to Know About Sex, but was afraid to ask.
Mm-hmm.
So I get up in front of the classroom, and I start my presentation off, and I write the words clitoris, cunnilingus, and fallopian up on the chalkboard. Okay, now remember, 10th grade, back in the 70s. Okay?
Right.
The English teacher doesn't move.
Nice.
He doesn't know what the words mean.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And of course the classmates aren't going to know anything. 10th grade, they didn't know spit back then, whatever. So anyways, I give my little speech, and I'm saying about how they don't prepare us, blah, blah, blah. I had this like clinching statement. I'd practiced this at home. I knew exactly how I wanted to end my presentation, and I looked at my classmates, really serious, and I said, you know what? You're going to find out very quickly that there's a lot more to sexual intercourse than a boy sticking his penis in a girl's vagina. Well, guess what? Everybody in the classroom knew those were.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Did that wake up your teacher?
Yeah, the teacher woke up and started screaming at me, telling me my presentation was over and to sit down. I told my mom and dad that night at dinner what I had done because I thought I was going to get suspended. My dad got the biggest kick out of it, and he said, well, if you get suspended, it's okay. At least you told him the truth. So.
Nice.
Right. So how did you come across that? Just because the book told you that? Did you resonate with it at all, or?
Yeah, I think that we're all curious. I don't want to say just boys are curious about sex because I think girls are too, but we don't kind of encourage or support that. But I wanted to learn. I always wanted to learn, and I didn't. I felt personally I wasn't going to be learning from looking at pictures in magazines or movies or anything. So I wanted to know what do people say about this. So, and that's all. And ever since, after graduating, like when I went for my PhD in clinical psychology, I had not specialized. Actually, most of my practicum work was in drug and alcohol rehabilitation. So, somebody came up to me after I graduated and just said, hey, would you be interested in becoming a sex therapist? And then when I said yeah, without knowing what was involved, that's, of course, there was a year's worth of study behind that, and then I was just like, I was totally captured by then. It got so passionate for me, so.
And how long have you been down this road?
Well, I graduated in 2007, so it took a year to get certified as a sex therapist, and I got that in November of 2008, and then now, I obviously am practicing. But I was, my supervisor basically kind of let me shadow her through her practice when she was, getting me up to speed and that. So those were invaluable lessons that I got from her as well.
And it is pretty amazing what's going on out there, and we're kind of here at in my camp. We're really all about helping to eradicate sexual ignorance because I think it's just how is it possible that this gift that we have of the ability to connect two bodies or two spirits, two souls in so many different ways is literally not talked about except, keep your pants on, don't get pregnant.
Yeah.
And it's hurting so many people. So many people get into relationship thinking that as long as they have sexual chemistry, they have that spark, and as long as they love each other, that somehow it's all going to work out.
Yeah.
How and we know that's not true.
Right. And added to that is that the chemistry and the passion that you felt on day one should last you through the entire lifetime of the relationship without any change.
Well, come on. It worked for Cinderella.
Yeah.
So you're telling me that my, Prince Charming doesn't ride off the mountaintop, and he teaches me all about my body, and life is just wonderful, and we live happily ever after.
Yeah, right.
You don't think that's working?
Yeah.
So then what? I tell people that, you of course know about the chemistry, right? The chemicals that happen in the body. That after a certain amount of time, 4 years at the most, those are gone. Mm-hmm. And we needed to replace them with, I always mess this one up and say oxycodone, which is not true. We need to replace those with major drugs. But it's oxytocin, that we need to create bonding hormones that make us feel connected and close to our partner. Can you talk a little bit about that? Or?
Yeah, and there I think is where a lot of education goes on, and that can happen at an adult level because guess what? They never learned it to begin with.
Right, so they have that fantasy that all those great feelings they have just kind of stay.
Yeah, exactly. And so they have to learn, like, okay, no, that's obviously not working. What are you doing differently? And I always, get a kick out of that when they come back and say, well, no, nothing's changed. And I say, well, what have you tried? Nothing. Okay, so you're just basically practicing the definition of insanity that I'll do nothing and expect a different result.
Right.
teaching them what. I take them back to the beginning. What did you do differently, in the beginning of your relationship that you're not doing now?
Well, you didn't have the history. You didn't have the pain. You didn't have the hassles and the heartache, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
And I use Gary Chapman's work on the 5 love languages to kind of reorient them to see, are you speaking each other's love language, to kind of get them, connected that way, at least to start, and then move them.
Well, because if you get a couple in that hasn't been having sex, you can't just go straight to the let's go have sex.
Right.
Because generally if a woman stops being interested, and, here's my take on low libido disorder for women. It's, they say like 58% of women would rather go shopping than have sex.
Uh-huh.
That's because they're not happy with the sex they're having.
Exactly.
It has nothing to do with women don't like sex, and I'm really tired of hearing that.
Yeah.
It's women don't like the sex they've been having, and they're not certain how to get it differently. Women are really, really afraid to tell a man what they need sexually, for the most part.
Yeah, you're talking about those reheated leftovers again.
Right, yeah, there we are, the reheated leftovers. Before we started the show today, we were joking because I'm doing this show from my house, right, and what the kind of chaos would ensue when that happened. And then we were talking about the pizza boy, or bringing in pizza, and I just had the absolute hottest, most glorious pizza man deliver me pizza on the planet.
Tell me his name.
Yeah, well, what do you think his name is?
I think his name is Max.
Do you think his name is Max? Exactly. So I just wanted to give kudos that I do have pizza in front of me now, and it was delivered by the hottest man on the planet.
Well, the hottest man that you were able to, persuade to stay and spend the night. It's got to work in the whole fantasy, right? Okay, it's mine.
Tell us more about the pizza. That's my fantasy.
Yeah, the pizza. Now everybody wants to hear about the pizza. Okay, look. So, John, we've got people out there. You're in Pennsylvania. Do you do phone coaching as well, or is it just in your office? What do you do?
I typically do it in the office. Although I've I've actually had emails from around the world. Believe it or not, I answered one from India last week where somebody was seeking, some questions around some sexual dysfunction, and I'm always happy to help out. I always tell people if you can see a therapist, go see one. But if you can't, you have some questions, I'll be happy to help you.
Right. And then, so typically people ask me this all the time, how long is it going to take?
Yeah, I get that.
I'm sorry, that one always makes me laugh a little bit because it's kind of like, I've got this 4-step formula, 4 sessions, and you're fixed.
Yeah. It's a performance-based recovery, into your sexuality.
So there is no way to really tell somebody, because it could just be that they're ignorant, right? Mm-hmm. And you give them some information, and they're good to go.
Right.
It could be that they have programming from their past, and that takes longer.
Right.
Or it might. There could be all sorts of variables in there. So what we need to really understand is that, no matter what I do or what John does or what anybody does, we don't really have an answer that's a quick fix. I think that ignorance is probably the fastest, quote-unquote, fix, giving people good information. Do you have resources on your site, or do you have handouts, or what do you do to help people to educate, if education is what's lacking, which most of it is?
Well, before I answer that, there's 2 other things that I tell people when they ask how long is this going to take.
Okay.
I said it depends on 2 things, and 2 things that are absolutely in your control. So you'll make that decision, and one of them is your attitude, and the other is your motivation. What's your motivation to make this change? So if you understand what motivates you and how to get you motivated, then you get on it.
So if the guy's just saying, I just want more sex,
yeah,
is that enough motivation?
No. Well, I mean that just says that sounds transactional to me. You just want more of something, but what's your motivation to get it? Like if you want to become take it to the sports. If you want to become a better ball player, just wanting to become a better ball player doesn't make you one. What are you willing to do? Like if you know that you have to do these many exercises, you have to eat this particular way, you have to get this much rest, how motivated are you to do all the things necessary to get you to where you want to be?
So some type of commitment to actually doing a process, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But on the educational side, there's a lot of resources that I'll refer to, but some of my favorites are Paul Joe and I got the guide to getting it on. I tell everybody that should be in the family library. You know, there's going to be some question that you have around human sexuality that's going to come up, and this is going to at least get you started with some answer. And Joe Nyes is just a great writer. He's very humorous in his approach, non-judgmental, takes a pleasure-based approach to sexuality. Very, very informative.
So the Guide to Getting It On.
Guide to Getting It On.
Your recommendation for everybody must read.
Yeah, it's a must. It's just a good family reference manual. I read a lot of stuff. Like for women, I encourage them to read Lonnie Barbach's, For Yourself. I like Maya Hart's When the Earth Moves. I think that should have been required reading for anybody who's getting into a heterosexual relationship. There's a book written like 20 years ago. His name was Bernie Zellbergeld. He wrote a book called The New Male Sexuality. And he has a revised edition. He's since passed away, but his book is still so relevant to today. There's a lot and that's a book that I encourage both the female partner to read with the male partner, because it really helps explain a lot about how men have come into their sexuality. It's not rocket science, and it hasn't changed. And we're still not doing anything different,
We still have the same parts in a brain?
Yeah.
The same evolutionary drive to procreate and plant the seed.
Well, he puts it, and here's how I explain it, is that men typically come into their sexuality around three cornerstones. It's private, it's impersonal, and it's secret. And you think the first time you get your sexual engine turned on in puberty, and then you have how many years to condition yourself looking at all of these various images, okay? Males are never getting a message sexually that, your sexual relation should be, the focus should be on the relation, not the sex. And so what ends up, and then, I attended a conference last year where they were talking about the number of porn pages. I think it's created per year in the U.S. dwarfs every country in the world.
Well, it's I think, it's the number one sexual addiction.
Yeah.
Porn addiction would be huge. And, I work with a lot of, I actually have a coaching program, an online or phone coaching program to help men over porn addiction as well, and I'm sure you work with that as well. And it's one of those things where the most fascinating way, so if you're a man listening, here, we've said this before, I'm sure, online, to take the 21-day porn challenge, and that means no porn, 21 days. But here's the deal. I really would love to see more people, men or women can take this challenge as well, of course, is to be able to feel arousal and pleasure in your body without looking at somebody else, thinking about somebody else, with no porn, but how about just tuning into your own personal experience? Because we're so disconnected, I feel, from our bodies and from our own sexuality that we're having to use porn or fantasy or something like that instead of actually finding out what does our body feel like.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So, men call me up and say, oh, my God, I can't get aroused. I'm 24 years old, and I can't get aroused unless I'm fantasizing or looking at porn. And, that's a serious disconnect.
Yeah.
And so, if you're out there and you're thinking about this, women, same thing. Do you have to fantasize to become aroused? What about your own body? What about just checking in and seeing what's going on? So everybody take that challenge, see what's happening, and if you can't get there, don't despair, because you can call John, you can call me, and a whole lot of other people, apparently, throughout the world.
That actually, the sensate focus gets at that, about, what are you experiencing, at least through touch even, So, it's not about bringing any other, what does it feel like for you, where are you experiencing it, what's that like?
Right, and for people to actually, what I like to tell them is to check into your breath when you're doing that. So if you're touching, or somebody's touching you, and you notice that you stopped breathing, your breath clenched, your body's giving you an indication of discomfort. There's something happening there. You learn to tune into your body and find out if, indeed, before your mind even realized it, did you disconnect? Did you just check out? We talk about women having problems with sex all the time in the sense that their mind's just going, right? completely checked out of their body. They're like thinking, oh, that felt good, and then did I get the laundry done, and what's happening over there, and oh yeah, that kind of felt good. And, they're so not present. And the breath work is what helps also to bring them back to that experience. And I think less women would be wanting to go shopping if everybody was getting a little bit more educated, right?
Right.
All right, thank you about that, Sam. So we have 4 minutes, John. Go ahead and so you're obviously on a crusade here. Help the education, help the world.
Well, let me ask you a question, Tanya, because this comes up for me frequently.
Sure.
It's a suggestion that I actually make to people. Okay, so it comes up when people have received, sex negative or sex, or I'll just say, we interpret it as negative, but it was a silence. How can you educate your children in ways that are healthy, at a very young age? But you have a 6-year-old daughter. I'm sure you're going to be thinking about how do I educate my daughter? Like, what are some of the things? People
Right.
are always looking for suggestions around that.
Well, I am happy to talk to you about that as soon as I turn off that weird noise. This has been a fun show with lots of interesting noises. I think that was my Skype. Whose Skype is that? Somebody turn your Skype off. So, how to help children around sexuality. It is something that I do talk to parents a lot in my couples classes and stuff, because obviously it starts with the kids. I mean, we need to bring up a generation that's not freaking out. My daughter, there's the Skype again. My daughter at 6 probably is more well-informed than most kids, in the sense that I would never, of course, have sex around my daughter, like, oh, we're just having sex now. But she also understands that my partner and I have private time. We practice the art of love. If there's weird, funny noises, not to worry. And she's very casual. It's in her life, she understands that animals mate, people mate to have babies. She understands how the baby gets there. It's based on her asking me questions. So when she asks me a question, I answer her honestly in small sound bites. So her first question, way back when, I think she was 3, she goes, well, how do animal babies, where do they come from? I'm like, well, animal babies are, come out of their mom's womb. And that was all she wanted at that point. And then the next question was, well, how do they get out? Well, they come out of the mother's vagina. And she goes, wow. And she's looking at herself at that point. She goes, Mama, that's pretty small. And I said, well, honey, when you're an adult, you're bigger and it stretches. And she goes, ooh, does that hurt? And I go, yeah, it does. And so, just natural curiosity of what children would have if parents weren't freaked out. Mm-hmm. But as soon as you get a charge around it or you freak out about it, they'll stop talking too, because they know you're uncomfortable.
Right.
Right? So, with Sam, did you just tell us something? 1 minute. All right. John, give us your website again.
Okay, www.bspitest.com.
And you can also find that on my Facebook. I got the link up there. And people can contact you if you're in the Philadelphia area.
Yeah, you can use the ASEC directory to get a hold of me, or you can, on my website, there's a contact me. You can send me an email.
Right.
I'm in Psychology Today on the Internet. You can go
awesome.
there and find me too.
And we want everybody to go and take your survey.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay? Everybody, go take the survey. It's anonymous. It's confidential. He's not hanging on to your IP address or anything like that. Go take. He needs more women. Ladies, go take the survey, and let's help him out so we can find out what this really looks like and help educate ourselves as well. Thanks a lot for being on today, John.
Well, thank you, Tanya.
Appreciate
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Awesome, and I'm sure we will have you back and talk again as you find out more and more on the survey.
Great.
Joshua, thank you so much for holding down the fort there.
You betcha. Nice to meet you, John.
Nice to meet you, too.
And Sam, thanks so much, as always, for being a cool dude on the keyboards there
Yeah.
for us.
Okay.
And, yeah, and all that. Book launch, March 23rd, launching my book. You need to get on Facebook. You need to get BeyondSexTantra.com. BeyondSexTantra.com, because if you buy the book 23rd, 24th, 25th this month, you get entered in to win a trip or a chance to stay in Hawaii for a week free. There's a good reason to buy a book. Forget reading the book, but you might be able to go to Hawaii. All right, everybody, thanks so much for being here. And Sam, count us down. Are we out? We're out. All righty, bye.
You have been listening to the Tantra, Love, Sex, and Intimacy Show with your host, Tanya Diamond. Don't miss next week's show at Thursday at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Until then, visit our website at www.tanyadiamond.com. That's TANJA for more information on workshops and classes.